To start this hour for you with President Trump and his legal team ramping up attacks against the Russia investigation and in the process stirring a little bit of political confusion. The president woke up this morning on another tear against the special counsel, at one point calling it, quote, McCarthyism at its worst, and writing off Mueller as too conflicted to head the investigation. His latest tirade triggered by a bombshell New York Times report revealing White House counsel Don McGahn has been cooperating extensively with Mueller's probe, meeting with Mueller's team for more than 30 hours going back to November. Now, as Trump raged on Twitter, his personal attorney Rudy Giuliani accused Mueller's team of leaking the story in its entirety. Giuliani also a surprising new reason for why the president should not testify before the special counsel. He explained.
This whole McGahn thing leaked from them. If they had some kind of evidence that there was collusion or there was obstruction, don't you think it would have been leaked? I mean, they leak everything else. Look, I'm not going to be rushed into having him testify so that he gets trapped into perjury. When you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
Joining me now to break this down, Darlene Superville, Associated Press White House reporter, Aswan Subasang, Daily Beast White House reporter, Rick Wilson, Republican strategist, and the author of Everything Trump Touches Dies, Stephen Cash, legal analyst, and Wendy Osefo, political commentator for The Hill. Okay, let's start off with this, if you can, for us, Darlene. We have a lot of back and forth here, not only from Donald Trump via his Twitter account, but also John Brennan taking to Meet the Press. And we also have Rudy Giuliani, also, who was on Meet the Press this morning. We played a little bit of what he said earlier, and I guess we have to take what is the most obvious headline, him summarizing what many might say has been happening for the last year and a half or so. The truth isn't the truth.
Well, that's an extraordinary statement, and I don't even know where to begin to try to parse Rudy Giuliani on that. It seems to be the Trump White House version of the Clinton version of, the is line. What your definition of is.
And that seems to be what we are seeing so far. And Aswan, why don't we play that first so we can hear it again, and Aswan will get your reflection.
Mm-hmm. When you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't...
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
No.
This is going to become a bad meme.
Don't do this to me.
Don't do truth isn't truth to me.
Donald Trump says, I didn't talk about Flynn with Comey. Comey says, you did talk about it. So tell me what the truth is.
Don McGahn might know.
If you're such a genius, Don McGahn doesn't know. If that's the situation, they have two pieces of evidence. Trump says, I didn't tell him, and the other guy says that he did say it. Which is the truth?
All right, Aswan, what is he saying here?
Well, in terms of the, quote, truth isn't truth, it's funny that Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, should say that because he himself practices that as if it were his modus operandi. I, like many other reporters covering this administration, speak to Rudy Giuliani on a semi-regular basis. And I know from firsthand experience that he'll say different things to me that he says to other reporters. He'll say contradictory things. What Rudy Giuliani's role in Trump's legal circle is just as much combative media spokesman as it is actual attorney. He'll say completely different things and contradictory things to various media outlets, and he'll sort of flood the zone with this Trumpian competing narratives as if to muddy the waters, either completely intentionally or unintentionally.
And potentially to get reaction, right, Aswan? And I'll just share what James Comey, former FBI director, said in response to Rudy Giuliani. He tweeted saying, truth exists and truth matters. Truth has always been the touchstone of our country's justice system and political life. People who lie are held accountable. If we are untethered to truth, our justice system cannot function, and a society based on the rule of law dissolved. So, Wendy, the former director, staying in the conversation here.
Yeah, he continues to stay in the conversation, but I think it's about the American people continuing to hold this White House accountable. They continue to do these things where they're doing smoke and mirrors to seem as though we don't understand what's going on here, and we really do understand what's going on. But unfortunately, this White House does not operate based upon truth. They operate based upon their own false narrative. And what we see going on here with McGahn is this whole notion of self-preservation that it has become a cornerstone of this administration. Everyone sees this as a sinking ship, and they're trying to save themselves before the boat completely goes under the water. So even Rudy Giuliani saying truth is truth and it depends on whose truth it is, you cannot be serious. The American people know what the truth is. And again, we have to continue to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable.
Steve, Wendy brought this up, Don McGahn, in the reporting that came out from the New York Times. And I think the reporting had been, we knew that there was going to be some discussion between McGahn and the Mueller team. Mm-hmm. It is the extent, I think, that surprised most watchers. You've seen the numbers here, 9 months, 3 interviews, according to the reporting, 30 hours as well. The question now is, how much exposure here does this administration face to the investigation based on what we learned from that article?
You know, it's interesting, the 30 hours, that does sound like a lot of time, but going back to what you just said, the truth is the truth, but the truth is hard. And when investigators are trying to get at the truth, it's a painstaking, difficult process. I'm not at all surprised that it was 30 hours or over so many months. Mm-hmm. The Mueller investigation has been characterized by a carefulness and a detail orientation that sometimes is boring, and it seems to take a long time. But that's how you get to truth.
It's the consistency of the truth or the lack thereof, is it not, if you are a prosecutor?
Absolutely. And what you're looking for are different sources of information to be able to compare them, different witnesses.
Right.
That's why when the mayor says, well, you have one person say one thing and you have another person say another thing, and therefore you cannot have truth, that's antithetical to everything prosecutors believe in. And in fact, our justice system, as Director Comey pointed out, believe in. And not to mention the other two institutions that are at issue here, our intelligence services and our media, journalists. Your entire profession is based on the idea that truth can be sought after and found.
And should be, and given context along the way. Rick Wilson, one of your fellow GOP strategists in the last hour, was saying how the White House may not have been prepared, Evan Siegfried was saying this, may not have been prepared for what came out with the Omarosa claims and tapes that have been played so far. That might also be applied to what we're learning right now in the Don McGahn relationship with the Mueller investigation. They knew potentially that it was going to be open, right? That was a strategy coming from John Dowd. But maybe they didn't know to what extent that we were just describing that Don McGahn was speaking with Mueller, and that might have surprised them.
I think Don McGahn may turn out to be one of the smarter people in the White House, because he has an instinct now, after watching Donald Trump throw staffer after staffer, cabinet member after cabinet member, friend after friend under the bus, that this is not a guy with a lot of loyalty to anyone other than himself. And so if McGahn's doing some of this out of self-preservation, I think that's a sign that he understands just how corrupt and how broken this White House is. And I have to contradict my old boss, Rudy Giuliani, when I say that it is not the special counsel's office leaking. They have been as silent as the tomb. They are not talking to reporters. They are not leaking. They are not putting things out there. These leaks are obviously coming from people around McGahn so he can draw up a greater barrier of protection between himself and the White House so he doesn't get thrown under the bus by Donald Trump, and so he doesn't become forced to be someone who is a party to some of the illegality, particularly on the obstruction side of this equation, which, you know, McGahn obviously is a bright man who values his future, and so he's going to try to escape from the radiation area that is going to be caused by Trump trying to drag him down and blame cast over to him.
And Rick, you're alluding here to the conversation that Rudy Giuliani had on Meet the Press, where he did say, oh, no, this is the Mueller team that is actually leaking the information for the New York Times report. I want to go to some reporting from us when you were saying that McGahn and Trump, that they don't speak very often, which is consistent with the New York Times as well.
Absolutely. My boss, Sam Stein, and I at thedailybeast.com reported back in May that people both within and outside of the White House who are familiar with the situation were telling us that Trump and his counsel, his White House counsel, Don McGahn, are barely on speaking terms anymore, and that they barely speak one-on-one or directly to each other anymore. Part of that has to do with their sort of clashing personalities. The two of them have never really been in a sort of buddy-buddy, shoot-the-breeze situation that it's sort of required for a top advisor within Trump world to stay close within Trump's inner circle. But the other reason, which I think is even more salient, has to do with the Mueller probe. The New York Times months ago broke a story that McGahn had threatened to resign after Trump had tried to order him, or suggested at the very least, for him to order the sacking of Robert Mueller. McGahn essentially said, if you do that, I'm on my way out of the White House. So the president dropped it. After that broke in the New York Times, the president tried to get Don McGahn to put out a public statement knocking down the New York Times story. McGahn repeatedly rebuffed the president, and according to our sources, this led to the president privately fuming to close associates, wondering aloud if McGahn himself had been a leak that had led to that original New York Times story. So the fact that Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is now going out blaming Team Mueller for all these leaks is richly ironic.
Yeah, and John Dowd, again, the former lead attorney for the president, saying that New York Times report was fiction. It appears, based on your reporting, the New York Times, that would not be the case. Darlene, just to get everything on the record, because there's so much to get on the record so far, the accusation of McCarthyism against Mueller from the president.
Well, that's just another example of the president. You've seen him all week tweeting about the investigation, trying to sort of undercut the special counsel, Robert Mueller. He had a lot of tweets earlier this week about Bruce Orr, who's a Justice Department official. This is the individual the president said a day or two ago that he may revoke his security clearance. There were tweets over the weekend about the rigged witch hunt, and now today you have him talking about McCarthyism and trying to compare the investigation to McCarthyism. And it's just part of the continued effort by the president to sort of sully the investigation in the eyes of the public, the credibility of the investigation in the eyes of the public.
That's the way we start the 5 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. Up next.